So I want to start with just keys to any new position, or any new anything you want to do. What's the need? You have to define what is it that you're trying to do, and take inventory of what you have. Everybody has a patient financial services department that will help patients with applications for state programs, right? But that's not what you want to do. You want to go one step further. So you want to honor that. This is what they do, and that's great, but we need to go a few roles down. And what's tangible? What is it that you can say, if you give me this, I'm going to do that with it? And biggest piece when you do anything is, what's the priority of the organization? So right now, my organization, the priority is Press Ganey scores. So I'm going to get on those coattails when we talk about financial counseling with my organization. And then the metrics. Metrics are absolutely essential. So I'm going to start by telling you what I did when I got to Southcoast. I got to Southcoast almost 4 years ago. And any of you know, this is the time when you start a new job, you have a window of time to get things that you need to get to do the job that you have. So never waste that window of time. So when I got there, I wanted to see what we had. What do we have in place? The things I wanted first and foremost was the write-off, denial, and collection rate. How are we doing financially? I wanted to know who was reviewing the insurance, who was looking at the out-of-pocket costs, who was determining the patient's ability to pay, who was helping the patients if they couldn't afford it. Because right now, we've got 3 payers in oncology, three places we can get money: patient, insurance, and foundations. And this is where we're unique. There are foundations for other areas, but not like oncology. We've got the bulk of them. So I wanted to know who's looking at that. Payment plans. As I said before, when you go to the dentist, it's the same stuff. It's a smaller list, but it's the same information. If they have it, there's no reason why we can't have it. Prior auths. Who's doing the prior auths? Who's doing the on-site collections? What do those look like? Who's answering questions? And who's acting as the financial point person for oncology? I would wager that all of us say, well, we're different in oncology. We're different. But this is the area where we really are different. So here were my answers when I did my inventory, which was funny because when I first got there and I wanted to see what have we written off? Nobody knew. Nobody knew. Nothing was coming back to the department. Nobody knew. But then, be careful what question you ask. So since I asked that, they dug it up. I now get to see it every month, and so does everybody else. But that's okay. So we had 44 write-off claims. So those weren't the denials that we fixed. This is what we actually wrote off. Nobody was doing the insurance review. Nobody was doing the out-of-pocket costs. Nobody was talking to the patients about that. Again, PFS, the Patient Financial Services in the hospital, way over there, they were doing that. Nobody was doing payment plans. On-site collections, anyone would take the payment if they offered, but then they just send it to the billing office. And if they had questions about their bill, they went to the hospital. And nobody was air traffic control. That's what I wanted, air traffic control for these kinds of things. So using that, I said, what do I need to do to change my current state? First thing, I need a single point of entry for all new patients. If I want to figure out what they have for insurance and what's out of pocket, I got to have it all coming into one place. I needed a form. So if I have it all coming into one place, I need to have that person know what to ask. What are you looking for? So I needed the benefit investigation form or a financial assessment form. My favorite piece was this contracted rates for all payers. This is really what I needed. If I was going to tell a patient how much it's going to cost you, I first have to know what I'm getting for it so I can tell you your percentage. And then a cost estimating tool, which again, will pull it all together. And that payment plan agreement outside of hospital policy, and I talked about that earlier, so critical. Look at what yours is, because if you ask somebody to pay a big amount over 2 years, you're never going to get it. So it's just a matter of how do we do this in an educated but formal way. So this is my first document that I started with, and you'll find this in the ACCC tool. So this has who it is, who's the doctor, insurance, the whole shebang, data service. What were we going to do to them? These are fictitious numbers, by the way. How much was it going to be charged? What's in our charge master? What's your co-insurance percentage? What's your deductible? So on and so forth. So I needed something like this to fill in. Now this, as I've said, this is my favorite thing ever. So I went to contracting and begged them to give me a sheet like this. So this is radiation oncology, fictitious numbers again. But across the top, you have your payers. Here's your charge master. So when I got this, those holes were real. So we weren't, for this payer, which is a big one, they weren't paying us for any of our SIMs, not a dime. Whoever was in contracting negotiated that, or for our, if you could see down here, our SBRT, none of it. And I would not have known that because it doesn't come to me as a denial because it's in the contract. So it's just the bill is done. So that aside, this is what you use when you do your estimate. So you say payer 1, if we charge, we'll just pick for a SIM, we charge $500, we've agreed to settle on $300. So when I'm going to estimate that patient's bill, let's say they're Medicare only, 20% of that $300. So I got it. So I'm filling in my form with, as I've said, a variety of different things. So this is what I want to show you. This is what we use for understanding what a patient has. This is out of a system called NEHAN. And so we run this system, put in the patient's information, and we do this daily. And we can see for this patient with an individual plan, right? Here's their deductible, $2,000, remaining nothing, right? On the family end, $4,000, remaining for their year, $1,727. And what else you don't see on this one is I can also see the running of their plan. Is it calendar year? Is it a different, like a physical year? So I can see where that is every day. This is the other one I get from there, out-of-pocket maximums. And for this particular patient, this is a real one as well, $2,950 individual, and she's got remaining $930. And so when I have my financial counselor, let's say she just walked into our clinic right now, when I have my financial counselor meet with her, we're doing a payment plan to get her and to help her understand when she's going to hit this, and she's already got that. So we're going to work with those numbers and educate her on, okay, so here's what you got. Your new plan starts January, February, whatever, so that that patient has an understanding of what's in front of her. So now that we have all that, now what? So as I said, I worked in the airline industry, and it was around September 11th. I still worked there. So I remember feeling, once I got past TSA, and TSA was such a pain, but I was airline, so I got to go on the tarmac and come up. Everybody back there had been screened. And we all know that. When we travel today, we know that if you're back there, you've been screened. So that carries over when I go into my own infusion room. I want to make sure that everybody in there has been screened. Different things, of course, but that their prior auth is in place, that we know what we're going to do, that that patient is aware, but it's the same principle. Different industries, but same principle. So this is the other piece. You got to ask yourself, what are you trying to accomplish? What do you want to do? Do you want to do something that's nice to have, or do you want to do something that is going to benefit the organization, benefit the patient? Then the other thing is, what are your collections? If you've got data that shows that your collection rate is at 30% of copays, you've got a problem. So it's really understanding what is it that you're trying to do, and where are we now compared to where I want to be? And then again, patient satisfaction, that's so huge. So here's something that I looked at when I was doing mine on our collections, right? So in my department, what was outstanding for certain accounts? And if you look at this, like $37, $18, this is outstanding, in my opinion, because we didn't ask. It's not that they wouldn't give it to us. We didn't ask. We didn't have a process set up to say, okay, Mr. Jones, you have an out-of-pocket balance or a remaining balance of $18.80. How would you like to pay that? We just didn't ask because, again, My system, which I love my system, they're so good, they just didn't know any better at the time, that was all on the back end. That was done somewhere else, but now bringing it up to the front end, that changes. So I go back to the skill task alignment, because that's a big one. What are you paying people to do? What's their skill set? And sometimes these positions, they just evolve out of necessity. But once it's out of necessity evolved, you've really got to look at who do you have doing it. And even if they're great, you don't want to have people that are being paid and have a higher skill set. So again, you pay RN, top 10%, $96,000, financial counselors around $42,000. So the other piece for me that made it easy was new regulations. So in Massachusetts, they put forth these new regulations that require providers, when asked, they give you 48 hours to give the patient a list of procedures that they're going to have done. So CPT codes in our speak, right? Tell me what those are. So we have 48 hours to give that to the patient. Then the patient can take that to the insurance company, who also fall under these regulations, that have 48 hours to get back to them with an out-of-pocket estimate. So this helped my argument as well, to say, listen, we have to be ready for this. We have to have something in place to be able to do that. And then, once you jumping into the Affordable Care Act, there's so much, and so many others have talked about it in greater detail than I have. But as you see, there's so much variation, and you have to be able to understand that variation, and then use the tools to establish where are you and when are you going to hit those numbers. So metrics, this is a big one for me. This is all about defining expectations. And if a patient's perception of what they're going to pay could be very different from actuality. So it's really understanding, helping them understand, this is what it's going to take, here's how we're going to handle it, and we can move on. But until you sit down and really look at this, it's like an elephant in the room for the patient. They're scared to death from so many perspectives, and finance is one of them. So this is one argument that I used to get my program started, is we're doing it anyway. We're just doing it after the fact. Let's move it up. Let's move it out of the back and put it up front. So it's really looking at who should be having that conversation to understand those bills. Somebody in oncology should be having those conversations. So, and pay now, pay later. That's really the reality. I mean, if your organization is not reviewing insurances, if you're not doing the prior auths, do you wait for it to come in on the back end as a denial, or are you proactive up front so then you can go back to your contracting department and say, we got a problem, Houston? And again, oncology, we are so different. There are other service lines that do have some external funding, but not like oncology. Oncology has so many different external funding opportunities. And then there's pharma. Pharma will help in certain situations, but you gotta have everything up front to know who's got what, how much is coming out of their pocket, who's gonna work with pharma. Nobody else is gonna do it but somebody in oncology. And then the philanthropy accounts. That's the other biggest piece. You can do a lot with your philanthropy account, but you have to manage it. Oncology specifically has to manage that account and know what you have where. It's like managing your own checkbook. How much do you have in savings? How much do you have in your money market? How much do you have in your regular checking? We have to be able to do that. And then always the issue of retention, because as hospitals get more pinched, you know as well as I do, we go to FTEs. Let's look at FTEs and who's bringing in money, who is a nice to have, who is somebody that we absolutely have to have. So you always have to be proactive and keep your numbers. Whatever it is they're doing, this is what mine does. Insurance enrollment, payment plans, patient satisfaction, improved collections, grant funding. Those things that you can target and say, I did 3 of those, 4 of those, 5 of those, keep track of that. Here's a simple example of one of those metrics that she does for me. So she gets all the new care plans, all of the IV care plans. I still have the nurse doing the orals, which is a different story. But she keeps track of how many of those care plans come to her on a daily basis that she has to get the prior auth for and do the search on the patient's insurance. And so when you do it, so let's say you have all of that and you've got it now, and you're going to go forward and ask for another one or starting it up. Do your homework. All the things that I just talked about, know all those things, and be very direct, because I have learned what I think is important to me may not be important to somebody else. So you sit in their seat and what is important to them? Is it dollars? Is it patient satisfaction? Whatever it is, know what's important to them. Know what it'll cost. Know what it'll bring in. Say, listen, if I get $40,000 in this first year, I can bring back in roughly whatever. Show them that metric. And know your process. Here's how I'm going to do it. Here's what I'm asking for. Here's what it's going to cost. Here's how I'm going to do it. And here's what you're going to see at the end of this, because they'll want to see that. Develop your monitoring metrics. When you go ask for something, you have to, again, say who, what, when, where, why, and say, here's how I'm going to monitor it. Because then it's an easy yes or no answer. If you've covered your bases, nobody's going to say, well, what about this? Well, what about that? And you don't want to get diverted. I'm going to do this. It's going to take me this long. It's going to cost me this much. This is what we're going to get out of it. Here are my metrics. And even throw in, and I will send that to you on a monthly basis or whatever it is. But I love this phrase, never waste a good crisis. Find the right time to do this. Find the right time to approach. And use your existing data to spotlight where are you missing. You know, as I go back to my first slide, this is all the things that I was wanting to do, that needing to do. And what did we have compared to that? And no soft numbers at all, ever. So, you know, here's just some other deliverables just to put that in your pocket. You know, there's so many, we know how valuable this is. We know it innately. Well, it's a duh for us. But when somebody doesn't work in your department every day and you see things from an organizational perspective way up here, where you do have one centralized office for this and another one for that, again, I'm just adamant that things are changing and you have to change along with it. And hospitals have to acknowledge we've done the same things the same ways for several years. So now, here's where we're at today. Here's where we're at, which is beautiful. So our write-off rate is $8,000. We've done $8,000 in write-offs this year, which is incredible. It's just all about the process. So the insurance review is done by my financial counselor. Out-of-pocket costs, financial counselor. All of I don't have to read it to you, but she's doing all of those things. She's splitting the prior auths from the orals and the IVs with one of my triage RNs. Collections again. So now when I took inventory and saw my holes, I've now filled my holes. And as you can see on the financial piece, best thing I've done yet. So that's it. That's what we do. That's how I've done it. And it feels like most organizations have these in place now, which is good, which is very, very good. But I can't stress enough how important it is to continue those metrics and continue demonstrating the value.